All right, welcome in everyone, ready for another deep dive. Today we're tackling Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
That the emperor philosopher.
Exactly. But we're going beyond the whole Emperor's Diary thing that everyone talks
Oh,
about.
very.
We're going to dig into how surprisingly relevant his advice is, even today, even for us, dealing with all the craziness of the world.
Totally. And we've got a great source for this, excerpts from a 1906 translation of Meditations. We'll be using the book's introduction, too, which has some juicy bits.
Juicy. Okay, I'm intrigued. So first things first, Marcus Aurelius.
Hmm.
He's one of those five good emperors, right? The ones historians are always gushing over.
Oh, yeah, he totally is. And the intro even mentions how H.P. Blavatsky, the mystic,
Mhm.
she put Aurelius in the same league as Plato and Socrates.
Whoa, hold on. Blavatsky, that's putting him in a very specific philosophical camp.
You got it.
Okay, so deeply respected mind. But here's what I find fascinating. The intro also talks about him ruling during some seriously rough times.
Mm.
Wars, plagues, the whole shebang.
Hmm.
And he was writing these deep thoughts while living in army camps. Not exactly a peaceful retreat.
Nope, not at all. Imagine you're leading an army, dealing with constant threats, and you still find time to reflect on the meaning of life, on virtue.
It's like, whoa, this guy was
For
committed.
sure.
Okay, so philosopher emperor, we get it. But what's that actually mean? How did he live that out?
Well, Aurelius was a Stoic, and luckily the intro to our translation does a great job explaining their beliefs. Basically, Stoics saw the universe itself as God.
The whole universe.
Yeah, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
And traditional gods, just different aspects of that one big force.
So, like, the universe is one giant divine being. Where do we fit into all of this?
Well, Stoics believed our souls are actually part of that divine universe.
Hmm.
And get this, they return to it after death.
Interesting. Okay, keep going.
But here's the concept that might throw you for a loop. They believe virtue was the only good and vice the only bad. Everything else, indifferent.
Wait, hold on. Everything else is indifferent. So, wealth, health, even power, all irrelevant to a Stoic.
You got it.
But how do you live by that? Especially as an emperor. I mean, he's literally in charge of an empire. Stuff Stoics would consider indifferent.
That's the paradox, right? How do you apply these Stoic principles when your life is full of those things?
Yeah, exactly.
Luckily, Aurelius gives us some clues, both in the intro and in those meditations excerpts.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Well, one thing that pops up constantly is how Aurelius keeps redirecting his attention. Not to the external events, all that chaos swirling around him,
Right?
but to what He can control. His own thoughts, his actions.
I see. It's like the ultimate Stoic life hack, right?
Yeah.
Ignore the external chaos, focus on your internal world. Sounds good in theory, but
But is it actually doable?
exactly. I mean, we all get caught up in things we can't control. It's human nature.
For sure. And that's where the practice comes in. Constant self-reflection. Aurelius was big on that.
He was.
Yeah, especially in Book 10. It's almost like he gives you, the reader, these prompts
Prompts for what?
to dissect your own life, to examine how you react to the world. Like he's saying, hey, look inward.
So it's not just about being like a wise emperor. It's about applying it to your own life.
Yeah.
Interesting. And he talks about justice a lot, right?
Oh, absolutely. And remember, for Stoics, living virtuously means living in harmony with the universe.
Okay, so justice isn't just about laws then.
Nope. It's about right action in every area of life, doing the right thing even when no one's watching. How do our actions affect the harmony of existence? That's the kind of question he wants us to ask.
Deep stuff.
Yeah.
And, it's almost radical when you think about it. This is an emperor with immense power we're talking about.
Right.
And that idea of kindness, even to those who wrong you. Tough one, especially for someone in his position. It's like he's saying, rise above it all. Take the high road.
Totally counterintuitive, right? But Aurelius, he keeps emphasizing it. Choosing kindness, it's not for the other person, it's for your own peace of mind.
Because anger and resentment just eat away at you in the end.
Right.
And of course, there's that classic Stoic line, live each day as if it were your last.
Ah, yes. Which so many people misunderstand. They think it means go wild, do whatever you want.
Right, like YOLO taken to the extreme.
But that's not what Aurelius means at all.
So what does he mean then?
He's saying live in alignment with your truest self and now W. Don't wait till you're on your deathbed to start living with purpose.
Don't waste time on things that don't matter. It's amazing how he uses the whole, vastness of the universe, the cosmic perspective on time,
Right.
to help us refrain our worries.
Right.
It's like, dude, in the grand scheme of things, does that spilled coffee really matter?
Exactly. It's about zooming out, beating that cosmic perspective. Our problems might feel huge, but compared to the immensity of the universe, they shrink.
Yeah, it puts things in perspective.
It shows how our worries often come from a very limited view.
Okay, so Aurelius paints this picture of the ideal Stoic, calm, rational, unfazed by all the external chaos.
Right.
But was he actually like that? I mean, did he walk the walk?
That's the million-dollar question. And the intro hints that even Aurelius struggled to live up to his own ideals.
He did.
Oh, yeah. He was human, after all.
Well, that's reassuring, especially when you read those letters, like the one where he's practically begging Fronto to defend his friend. The tone is so different from Meditations. It's like raw emotion.
Totally. We're seeing a different side of the emperor philosopher, a man dealing with power, with the loss of his children, with difficult people.
It makes him relatable, right? Like even someone who dedicates their life to philosophy is still going through it.
For sure. It makes his ideas more compelling, I think, because we see he's not just spouting theories.
And speaking of human relationships, we can't forget Fronto. The intro suggests he was more than just a fan of Aurelius's, like maybe a grounding influence, pushing him toward honesty and simpler language.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Like maybe Fronto helped shape those meditations in a way.
Right. The intro mentions how Fronto encouraged Aurelius to be less high-flown in his writing.
Which makes those letter excerpts even more intriguing. You see Fronto being genuinely caring, offering both praise and criticism. He's not just a yes man.
Not at all. He's pushing Aurelius to be better, more authentic.
Exactly. It's a great example of how valuable those honest, supportive relationships can be. Even emperors need them.
So we've got this emperor seeking wisdom, a mentor who's not afraid to challenge him. It adds a whole new layer to our understanding of Marcus Aurelius and his philosophy. But let's dive into the actual advice he offers in Meditations. We've talked about the big ideas, but what are some specific takeaways you found helpful?
Well, one that comes to mind is this idea of actively seeking wisdom from others. In Book 1, Section 8, Aurelius makes a list of all the things he learned from different people.
Because
Oh, yeah. And what's striking is how intentional he is about it, gathering all these diverse perspectives like he's on a mission. He even thanks someone for showing him that his own life wanted some redress and cure.
wow, it's humbling, isn't it? Even emperors need guidance.
Absolutely. And he's not just name-dropping famous philosophers either. Aurelius finds wisdom in everyday interactions. Take Book 1, Section 15, for example. He describes a man named Claudius Maximus who faced incredible challenges, but
What about him?
he faced them with this unwavering resilience. Aurelius says Maximus was the same man, whether in the sharpest pains or after the loss of a child or in long diseases.
It's almost unimaginable, that level of fortitude.
Right. It makes you wonder, how do we cultivate that kind of strength in our own behaves?
Yeah, good question.
Well, notice how Aurelius doesn't just admire Maximus from afar. He uses him as a model for his own behavior. He's actively trying to cultivate those same qualities in herself.
Ah, so it's not just reading about resilience, it's seeking out real-world examples and trying to actually embody those lessons.
Exactly.
It's like he's creating this mental toolbox of virtues, drawing inspiration from everyone he encounters.
And it's a reminder that wisdom can be found in the most unexpected places. If we're open to it, that is.
If we pay attention, yeah. So this emphasis on controlling our reaction, it leads to another key piece of advice from Aurelius' self-awareness. He's always reflecting on his own thoughts and actions.
It's like he's holding up a mirror to his own soul. And sometimes that reflection isn't pretty.
Like when?
Well, in Book 2, Section 3, for instance, he tells his own soul to abuse and contemn thyself.
Whoa, harsh.
Yeah, right? It's because his soul is wasting time dwelling on the opinions of others.
Ah, I see.
It's a powerful reminder that our happiness, it often depends on our internal state, not on what other people think.
It's about taking control of your own narrative.
Exactly. Aurelius is challenging us to be active participants in our own lives, not slaves to our emotions.
Not letting our emotions run the show. Easier said than done sometimes.
Absolutely. And it's not just about ignoring what other people think. In Book 2, Section 7, Aurelius gets into this really interesting distinction between acting out of anger, which is giving into passion, basically, versus acting out of lust, which, he argues, is a deliberate choice.
Okay. So, anger, bad. Lust.
Not necessarily bad in this context, because it's a conscious decision. Aurelius is suggesting that true freedom, it comes from acting in alignment with our reasoned choices, not our impulsive desires.
Making intentional choices, not just reacting. That makes sense.
It's about owning our actions, not just being swept along by the world around us.
But in a world that's full of distractions, pressures, how do we even do that? How do we cultivate that inner stillness?
That's the challenge Aurelius poses, right? In our crazy, hyper-connected world, it's harder than ever.
Yeah, you're bombarded with information, opinions, everything. It's tough.
It's a practice, for sure, not a destination. And speaking of challenges,
Uh-oh, what now?
dealing with difficult people, Aurelius, as an emperor, I'm sure he had his fair share of those.
Oh, I bet. Any advice on that front?
His advice is surprisingly relevant even today. In Book 6, Section 26, he points out that the things that bother us about others, they're often things they can't control.
Like what?
He actually says, such is his breath naturally, and such are his armpits, and from such an effect, and such a smell must of necessity proceed.
Okay, that's vivid and kind of funny. But it's true, right? Sometimes people are just smelly.
Exactly. But getting upset about it won't change anything.
It's like pick your battles.
It's a reminder that we're all works in progress, and extending a little grace to ourselves and others can go a long way.
It's about accepting people for who they are, quirks and all.
And not wasting energy on things we can't change. Which brings us back to that Stoic idea of focusing on what we can control.
Right, we can't control someone else's breath, or their armpits for that matter, but we can control our own reactions.
Exactly. Aurelius also reminds us that everyone is fighting their own battles. In Book 7, Section 15, he says, "Doth any man offend? It is against himself that he offends."
So instead of taking it personally, we can try to see it as stemming from their own struggles, their own stuff they're dealing with.
It doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it allows for more compassion, more understanding.
It's a shift in perspective, and it makes me think of another piece of advice that feels super relevant today, his emphasis on perspective in general. In Book 4, Section 3, he reminds us that all these things which now thou seest shall within a very little while be changed, and be no more.
He's constantly reminding us of the impermanence of things. Everything is in flux, always changing.
Nothing stays the same. And he doesn't just say it, he really brings it home. He says, "Ever call to mind how many changes and alterations in the world thou thyself hast already been an eyewitness of in thy time."
Powerful, right? It makes you really visualize it.
Yeah, like, whoa, things have changed so much, even in my own lifetime.
It helps us to let go of trying to control everything.
To just be in the present moment.
Exactly. But Aurelius, he doesn't advocate for a purely detached, emotionless existence either.
He doesn't.
Nope. He also talks about the importance of joy, of appreciating the good things in life.
Okay, like what?
In Book 5, Section 2, he encourages us to really look around and find something to appreciate, even in the simplest things.
It's about cultivating gratitude.
Absolutely. Even amidst challenges, there's always something to be grateful for.
It changes your whole outlook, focusing on the positive.
Right. It's like choosing to see the abundance instead of what's lacking. And this brings us to another piece of advice that might resonate with you.
What was that?
His counsel on accepting what we can't control.
Okay, tell me more about that.
In Book 8, Section 2, Aurelius states, "Whatsoever doth happen unto thee, thou art naturally by thy natural constitution either able to bear it or not able to bear it."
Simple, but deep.
It is, right? He's basically saying, look, some things are just going to be tough. You can fight against them and make yourself miserable, or you can accept them and move forward.
Acceptance, that's a tough one.
It doesn't mean giving up. It's about acknowledging reality and focusing your energy on what you can influence.
Choosing your battles.
Exactly. There's power in recognizing our own limitations.
And finding peace within that surrender.
I agree. And there's this recurring theme, too, of finding strength and solace in our connection to something bigger than ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
In Book 9, Section 9, he talks about how we're all part of a larger whole. He writes, "We are all working together to one end, some with knowledge and understanding of what is going on, some without knowledge."
We're all connected.
It's a beautiful reminder that we're not alone in this journey. Our actions, even the small ones, have ripple effects.
So we should live with purpose.
Yeah.
Because we're part of something larger.
Exactly. And that can be so comforting, especially when things feel chaotic or tough. Like, even when things feel overwhelming, there's a sense of order and meaning in the universe.
It's reassuring.
And by tapping into that, we find a sense of belonging, of resilience.
Beautiful. And it makes me think about how Aurelius talks about living in accordance with nature.
Ah, yes. Which is often misunderstood.
Right. People think it means living a simple, rustic life.
Totally. But for Stoics, Living in accordance with nature means aligning yourself with the rational order of the universe
It's about understanding our place in the grand scheme of things.
and acting in a way that's aligned with that understanding. It's about virtue, seeking wisdom, contributing to the common good.
It's a pretty tall order.
It is. But even if we don't achieve perfect Stoic enlightenment,
Yeah, let's be realistic.
Aurelius offers some incredibly valuable guidance for navigating this crazy thing called life.
So if an emperor in the 2nd century found these principles helpful,
Mm-hmm.
how can we apply them to our own lives in the 21st century? It's a question worth exploring further.
It is. And speaking of exploring further, there's one more aspect of Aurelius's life and work that we need to address.
And what's that?
Well, remember how we talked about Aurelius being human?
Yeah.
The intro to our translation, it doesn't shy away from some of the, well, harsher realities of his reign.
Like what?
His treatment of Christians. It's a complex issue. The intro brings up the martyrdom of Justin in Rome, Polycarp in Smyrna, even mentions what it calls outbreaks of fanaticism against Christians in the provinces.
This was a period of intense persecution, right?
It was. And Aurelius, wise philosopher though he may have been,
He was also a product of his time.
exactly.
It's a good reminder that we have to look at these historical figures with a critical eye. We can admire their wisdom, learn from their insights, but also acknowledge that they were flawed individuals.
Operating within a specific historical context, which can be so different from our own.
Exactly. We can't just put them on a pedestal and ignore the parts that make us uncomfortable.
Fully agree.
And speaking of nuanced perspectives, there's something else in the intro I found fascinating, the light it sheds on Aurelius's relationship with Fronto.
Ah, yes. Fronto, the emperor's mentor, confidant, and occasional thorn in his side, it seems.
Their relationship was clearly important to Aurelius, and the intro includes a bunch of their letters back and forth.
It does.
And you see that Fronto wasn't afraid to challenge Aurelius, even on sensitive topics.
Oh, absolutely. He's giving honest counsel, even when it might not have been what Aurelius wanted to hear.
There's one letter excerpt where Fronto pushes back against Aurelius intervening in a legal case. It involved a friend of Aurelius's, and Fronto's basically saying, look, you can't let personal feelings cloud your judgment.
Even for a friend.
Exactly. He's reminding Aurelius of the importance of impartiality, of justice.
Sticking to those principles.
And what I find striking is that Aurelius takes it to heart. He doesn't get defensive. He actually thanks Fronto for his honesty.
Doesn't that say a lot about their relationship? Aurelius, he genuinely wanted to improve. He wasn't looking for someone to just agree with him all the time.
He wanted to be challenged, to become a better ruler, a better person.
It's a powerful example of how valuable mentorship can be.
No matter what stage of life you're in, having someone who can offer honest feedback, it's crucial for growth.
Absolutely, and it brings us back to the core of Stoicism, doesn't it? That emphasis on virtue, on justice, living in harmony with the universe.
It's about striving to be our best selves, even with all the challenges, the imperfections.
Of being human.
Exactly. Aurelius, maybe he didn't always live up to those ideals perfectly. I mean, who does?
Right.
But his writings, they offer a roadmap, a way to navigate all the complexities of life.
I couldn't agree more. Meditations, it's a reminder that even in a world full of chaos, uncertainty, we can find peace, meaning, by focusing on what we can control.
Our thoughts, our actions, our choices.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Don't let Marcus Aurelius' status as an emperor intimidate you. Meditations isn't just some dusty old book.
It's a treasure trove of wisdom, just as relevant today as it was almost 2,000 years ago.
And it's worth engaging with, thoughtfully, critically, with an open mind. You might be surprised at what you find in those pages.
Insights that can help you on your journey.
Because if an emperor in the 2nd century found solace and strength in Stoic philosophy,
Maybe, just maybe.
it can offer something valuable to you too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into meditations.